I greet you once again this morning, and I welcome you to our today's class. In our religious class today, we'll be covering Confucianism. Confucius was born 2,500 years ago in East China. Confucius is the Latinized form of the Chinese name Confuzi, meaning of the tribe of Fuzi. Then there we have the Confucius symbol. That is the symbol that they use in Confucianism. We look at China in the time of Confucius, the kind of build a historical background, the cultural background into which Confucianism arose. Confucius was born and lived during the spring and autumn period of the Zhou dynasty. So dynasties in China, when we look at that, there were about 124 states shortly before Confucius' birth and around 70 during his life. So you can see there was kind of a disintegration in the society. They're talking about dynasties in China. A dynasty, of course, you know, it is a system of rulership that is based on family hereditary. That is one leader. There is a family, a ruling family, and that leaders will come from that particular family. So there were about 13 different dynasties that ruled ancient China. We'll mention a few. The Xia dynasty. The Xia dynasty is largely considered to be the first one in ancient China. It lasted for over 500 years and saw the rule of 17 different emperors. This dynasty was set up by Yu the Great. Then the next dynasty, we have the Shang dynasty. The Shang dynasty lasted for about 600 years and was led by 30 different emperors. Then we come to the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty has the distinction of being rulers for the longest amount of time. They lasted for about 800 years and had that 7 different rulers rise to power. The Zhou dynasty was established on the system of feudalism. The ruling period is divided into 2 different time periods, which are known as the Western Zhou and the Eastern Zhou, the Eastern Zhou. In the year 221 BC, this dynasty was overthrown by Qin. He then combined all of China under his rule and set up the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty, this is one of the shortest dynasties as it only lasted for 15 years. It was, however, one of the most influential. Emperor Shi Huangqi dynasty. Then we have the Han dynasty. Then 6 dynasties after the fall of the Han dynasty. In 220 AD, 6 different dynasties popped up, which competed with each other over the rule of China. These 6 different groups held sway for the next 350 years. Then we have a map here showing the warring states of China. So Confucianism developed in the Eastern Zhou dynasty, spring and autumn warring states period. This is about 260 BCE. Beginning in the 8th century BC, the authority of the emperors degenerated and hundreds of warlords fought among themselves until 7 major kingdoms prevailed. Okay. The Eastern Zhou spring and autumn warring states. This led to the formulation of the Eastern Zhou dynasty, 770 to 221 BC. The spring and autumn period, 771 482 BC. The warring states period, 481 to 21 BC, and the age of the philosophers. And the China's classical age, 6th century to 3rd century BC, occurred within the Zhou dynasty. According to the Atlantic Monthly, a world where human relationships are challenging, narcissism and self-centeredness are on the rise, and there is disagreement on the best way for people to live harmoniously together. It describes China 2,500 years ago. This is the environment into which, the kind of surroundings into which Confucius found himself and impacted on the kind of philosophy that he developed. Historian Francis Fukuyama of Johns Hopkins wrote, as a result of the 5,000 years of intensive warfare that occurred during the spring and autumn and warring states period, the Eastern Zhou dynasty 711 to 11 BC, Chinese states formed and began to consolidate into a smaller number of larger polities. Then another scholar, Dr. Robert Eno of Indiana University, wrote, China's classical age was a tumultuous era, filled with the dangers of constant civil war, political disruptions, and unpredictable social change. The intellectual elite of that period, who are the authors of all the textual records of that time, were anxious to search the past, looking for political and ethical models that could help them extricate society from this era of crisis and chaos. We can compare this with our country. Most of the political elites that we have in Kenya today arise out of a post-colonial era where the majority of citizens felt betrayed by those that had, in quotes, brought liberation to our country. And then, after the colonials had left, those natives who had led the nation into freedom, in quotes, later on became the colonials. They became guilty of the same evils, the same oppression that the colonials had actually used against the citizens. And so this is similar. What we see here, the prevailing circumstances in his time actually contributed to the kind of philosophy that has developed to be referred today as Confucianism. Political conditions in Confucius' time. In the 1st century Eastern Zhou period, hold of the privileged elite on power and prestige gradually began to decline. Dr. Robert Eno of Indiana University wrote, during this period, two central intellectual questions arose in response to the social change that undermined the monopoly on social advantage that hereditary status had enjoyed. Question number one was, how should the privileges of hereditary status be balanced against the merits of personal talent and accomplishment? And then the second question was, what sorts of talents and accomplishments should be considered to be meritorious? It is against the background of these two questions that the ideology of Confucianism arose. Confucianism answered these questions in a way different from society at large. Confucius, 551, 479 BC, lived during this transition of Chinese society. He saw, as did everyone else of his day, how the demand for talent was undercutting the exclusive privileges of heredity. Confucius was a strong advocate of the priority of merit over birth. He and his followers were all members of the Shi class, but he was dismayed by many aspects, the changes he observed. The types of merit that receive the greatest rewards seem to include ruthlessness in battle, glib dishonesty in speech, cold-hearted disregard for the suffering of the people. During these times of disruption and a willingness to win the favor of men in power by demonstrating that there was no speech too coarse and no act too brutal to say or do. So what is Confucianism? Basically, it is the teachings of Confucius. His main tenet was Chunzu, the ideal person. So he focused on what could be the definition of the ideal person, the ethical person. Confucius taught that the key to achieving proper mastery of self was to establish 5 important relationships that he referred to as Li. And so he emphasized on 5 important relationships, that what he refers to as Li, that for a person to be, a moral, upright person in society, then he has to ensure that these 5 important relationships are very well established. The relationship between the ruler and the subject, it must be very well nurtured. The relationship between the parent and the child, he emphasized the parent and child relationship, it must be well nurtured. The relationship between the husband and wife, the relationship between the elder brother and the younger brother, the older friend and the younger friend. So those are the 5 key relationships according to Confucius, for a person to function as an ideal. So he focused on the ideal person, because as we have already mentioned, this was a society in which people were not really paying attention to what it means to be an ethical person. So each member in the relationship has responsibilities. Each relationship implies a hierarchy between the two that should be earned. So an elder brother will be honored by the younger brother, not because the younger brother is young, but because the elder brother conducts themselves in such a manner that the younger brother will respect them. The husband and wife. The husband will be honored by the wife, not because he's the head or because he's stronger, but he will conduct himself in such an ideal way that the wife will honor. So the superior or the greater one in the relationship, to ensure the responsibility to ensure that they earn the respect, the honor, the dignity from the lesser person, so to speak, in that particular relationship. So he looked at that and said, in this, for a person to be an ideal woman and ideal man, they have a responsibility to handle themselves in such a manner that they will earn respect, honor, and the esteem that is befitting for that particular relationship. It will not just happen coincidentally. Then the other area that he focused is respect for parents, for ancestors, and for the living elders. There is a typo there. That should be an R. So while your parents are alive, a good son, daughter does not wander far afield. That is one quote from Confucius. So he emphasized that has to be respect for us to have, for society to have, to really be closely knit together. for the society to be in unity and in harmony, emphasized on what they refer to as sphere, and this is the area of respect for parents, for ancestors, and for the living elders. So, in summary, what he said there in that aspect is that you are all the relationships you are part of. And that is what somebody has said or has referred to us in a different way. That I am because we are, and we are because I am. So basically, that's what he taught. So there is the individual, then the home, then of course the neighbors, the nation, and the whole of humanity. So we are interlinked. The individual has to live in harmony with all these relationships and ensure that he maintains a good relationship at all levels for the society to actually function in harmony. Then the third major point for Confucius was the doctrine of the mean. This means moderation as strive not for excesses. And here, what he actually said is that actually it is similar to what Buddha's described as the middle way. And the idea here is that everybody is in a chaotic culture, but we have to make society to be cohesive. The Tao cannot be removed even for a moment. That which can be removed is not the Tao. Even though we lost our focus, our divine connections can never be removed, and all will always remain within us. Anything of the physical realm that can be taken from us, including the physical body, but our soul and divine connections will always remain. So he emphasized on that concept, what we are referring there to as the doctrine of the mean. And that is an emphasis on moderation, that we have to live moderate lives. We have to ensure that we actually minimize on the excesses and choose those qualities, make those decisions that will contribute more to a cohesive and a more harmonious society, and avoid those which will bring or will be a source of chaos or division and disintegration in the society. So you can see that, of course, you can compare that, of course, with the question. The interesting question there will be, how does this relate to our Christian, the biblical teaching, the teachings of our Lord Jesus Christ? And then further description on the doctrine of the mean. Before the bursting of joy, anger, sorrow, happiness, that is the center. After the bursting, but with proper extinction, that is harmony. Any outburst of emotion will disturb the spirit, and removing it from the tranquil center with the discipline, a person can control one's emotion and not be overrun by emotion. When a person attains this, then a person will not be afflicted by the heart and becomes the master of the heart, hence attains harmony. That's another quote from Confucius. When one attains center and harmony, heaven will bestow divine position, all creations will be nourished. When one attains such a state, the divine will bestowed with divine rank, i.e. Bodhisattva, which all spirits of spirit realm will respect. When one attains such a state, his or her essence will permeate to all parts of the universe, and all of creation will benefit and be nourished by such energy. Then, so basically that is, those are the main teachings that Confucius actually emphasized. And you can see when you look at all those three main areas, three main points, the emphasis is on harmony, The emphasis is on ensuring that society does not disintegrate. Then we can look at Confucianism in Kenya. Recent data highlights how China has intensified its effort to enhance the cultural dimensions of its relations with African partners by establishing over 770 Confucius institutes and classrooms across the continent in the last 14 years. From zero presence in Africa before 2005, the number of Confucius institutes has risen to a total of 48 in 2018, according to data compiled by Development Reimagined, a Beijing-based international consulting firm working in the field of China-African relations. Major universities in Kenya with Confucius institutes are University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University, and Moi University. Confucius Institute is an education cultural exchange organization set up by Han of China in all parts of the world to spread Chinese language, teaching, and Chinese culture. According to the 2014 official statistics, China has opened 475 Confucius Institutes and 851 Confucius classrooms across 126 countries and regions worldwide. In Africa, the first Confucius Institute was founded in 2015 in Kenya's University of Nairobi. By far, there have been some 40 Confucius Institutes in over 30 countries across the continent. Confucius scriptures. Confucius, a title meaning master, wrote in the 5th century, creating a pragmatic philosophy that came to dominate Chinese thought. His status evolved greatly over the succeeding 1500 years as cultural and political changes swept China, but the canon established then has endured. In the 12th century, Zhu Zi codified the sacred texts of Confucianism, calling them simply the 4 books, which are the Great Learning, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Mencius, and the Doctrine of the Mean. Then we can look at those scriptures. The first one is the Great Learning. Zhu listed the Great Learning first among the 4 books, not because it is the most important, but because it should be read first. It lays out the framework from which Confucians can progress to study the other texts. The Great Learning, or Dugzhe, originated as a chapter in the Book of Rites, a huge compendium dating from the 2nd century BC. The other text, the Analects of Confucius, is a collection of sayings and lessons, records conversations Confucius had with a group of students in his home province of Lu between 510 and 479 BC. Zhu placed the Analects, or Lu Yu, second in his list of 4 books because its foundation for learning builds upon the framework of the first book taken together. The book depicts a man who valued learning not only for its own sake, but also as a path to spiritual fulfillment. In turn, led to greater learning. Then the other important scriptures, the Book of Mencius. Mencius, who lived in the 3rd century BC, is second only to Confucius himself in the Confucian tradition. Thanks largely to Jews' influence, Mencius taught that human nature is essentially good, and although his goodness can be either cultivated or squandered, it can never be entirely lost. Zhu placed Mencius third in his list of the 4 books because, having achieved the basic framework and the basic principles, the reader would here proceed to find stimulation. The 4th book, which constitutes part of the Confucius scriptures, is the book that is referred to as the Doctrine of the Mean. Attributed to Confucius' grandson, Kongji, Doctrine of the Mean also originated as a chapter of the Book of Rites. Zhu placed this text last among the 4 books because, having studied the other 3, the student could here study the intricacies of Confucius philosophy. A key point of the doctrine of the mean is the importance of a unified purpose between principle and mind, whereby one might achieve within oneself a manifestation of heaven. Then our last section there is on worship in Confucianism. In Confucianism, worship mainly involves respecting your elders, continuing the family by marrying and having children, and by bringing to shame, no shame or disgrace to the family. The primary idea in Confucianism is to live an ideal moral life while on earth. Confucius believed in Taoism, the great ultimate, or Tao. Confucianism is neither a monotheistic religion or a polytheistic religion. It is more a system of ethics and moral behavior. Okay, so that is briefly on Confucianism. So after you have watched and gone through these slides, make sure you respond to the questions that I will have posted for you on our wall, on our class wall. So keep watching for more videos that will be following in this course.